السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه وبعد. So I'm usually not here Saturday evenings as we've been shifting around some of the Khatirah dates. So for this series that we started last week, where we cover Sayyid al-Khatir of Imam Ibn al-Jawzi, we will be doing this inshallah starting. Well, we already started, but we're going to have a schedule where we're doing it on Saturday. Today is Saturday, yes. I'm talking about before that. Thursday and Saturday, inshallah. And so we continue where we left off, reading from the reflections of Imam Ibn al-Jawzi in Sayyid al-Khatir. And if you haven't attended the previous sessions, just as a quick description, this is a collection of reflections. Many of them are very personal reflections for himself. Many of them are addressing other people, and they are very honest to the point of being like a kind of sledgehammer to the nafs. And as for the relevance of Sayyid al-Khatir, well, really, Ibn al-Jawzi, rahimahullah ta'ala, he is you can call him the wadi' or the founder of the science, the codified science of wa'adh and khatiras. So who's the first person to really develop this as its own science? Ibn al-Jawzi rahimahullah. So in this section he says in the very beginning, أعظم المعاقبة أن لا يحس المعاقب بالعقوبة. This section he says the greatest punishment is when the punished person does not sense he is being punished. So when we hear about uquba, punishment, we often think of torment in the grave, adab al-qabr, or the difficulties experienced yawm al-qiyamah, or the punishment in hell. Ajirna Allah min al-nar, Allah protect us from hellfire, ameen. So we think of uquba in terms of these punishments, but he is telling us that the punishments, the uqubat of Allah Ta'ala, go beyond the painful means of extricating the spiritual pollution that results from sins. And so he says, وَأَشَدُّ مِنْ ذَلِكَ السُّرُورُ بِمَا هُوَ عُقُوبَةٌ كَالْفَرَحِ بِالْمَالِ الْحَرَامِ وَالتَّمَكُّنِ مِنَ الذُّنُوبِ. Even worse is to be pleased with the fact that one is being punished. How can a person be pleased with being punished? He says, such as rejoicing in unlawful wealth and being given the ability to easily commit sins. To feel joy at having the doors of evil opened, he says, is a kind of punishment. In fact, it's one of the worst forms of punishment because the person doesn't actually sense it's a punishment. He says, وَمَنْ هَذِهِ حَالُهُ لَا يَحْزُنُ لِفَوْتِ طَاعَةٍ. The person in this condition will not feel any grief over the loss of obedience. This is one of the greatest parts of the punishment. Why is this? It is because, as you all know, sin is a kind of spiritual poison, and that poison darkens and hardens the heart, eventually leading to the death of the heart. And one of the punishments for sin, and one of the worst punishments, is that a person is denied the joy of rejoicing in munajat, in that intimate discourse with Allah Ta'ala, where they are denied halawa, the sweetness of obedience to Allah, and ibadah, and ubudiyya, and ubuda, all of these beautiful states. And this actually is explained later in our history by Imam Ibn Ata'illah, rahimahullah, in his hikam. He says, من علامات موت القلب عدم الحزن على ما فاتك من الموافقات وترك الندم على ما فعلته من وجود الزلات. A sign of the heart's death is the absence of sadness over the acts of obedience that you have neglected. It's one thing to miss a fard and feel bad about it, but this is describing the person who neglects all sorts of wajibat and obligations Allah has put on his shoulders, and he neglects them and he feels nothing. No regret whatsoever. This is a sign. And the lack of remorse over mistakes one has made. This is a sign that the heart is dead or dying. So this means if you feel the pain of neglecting Allah's rights over you, or you feel the pain of sins and disobedience, you feel bad about it, even if you feel you're in the lowest of possible states, your heart is still alive. If a person comes and says, I feel down and out and dejected because I am so distant from Allah, I neglect the obligations, the wajibat, I have turned away from Allah, I do all sorts of things I shouldn't do and I feel bad about it, the fact that they feel bad is a sign that the heart is still alive. So they should rejoice in the fact that they still have signs of life. But the signs of death is, you don't feel bad about it one way or the other. It's like water over a duck's back. It's nothing to this person. So Ibn al-Jawzi is saying that this is the worst kind of punishment. To be in a state of punishment and not even realize it. You're being cut off from closeness to Allah, and that is not a temporary state. It is the norm for the person, and they are indifferent. And some of the ulama, they say the greatest threat to Islam and the preservation of Iman is not atheism. It's not atheism. It is indifference. It is indifference born of apathy. Apathy is a punishment in itself. So he says, this is a great punishment, but there are other forms. He says, وَإِنِّي تَدَبَّرْتُ أَحْوَالَ أَكْثَرِ الْعُلَمَاءِ وَالْمُتَزَهِّدِينَ فَرَأَيْتُهُمْ فِي عُقُوبَاتٍ لَا يُحِسُّونَ بِهَا وَمُعْظَمُهَا مِنْ قِبَلِ طَلَبِهِمْ لِلرِّيَاسَةِ. Now he starts to go deeper into looking at the problems in society during his time. He says, I contemplated the condition of the majority of the scholars and the mutazahideen, the ascetics, people who cut themselves off from dunya, and I realized that they too are subjected to punishments and do not even realize it. It is often the case that punishment befalls them due to one thing, talab al-riyasa, seeking leadership, seeking authority, power in the hearts of people. He's saying that the punishments that they are subjected to are punishments such as craving, suspicion, envy over each other, rancor, and so on. All of these, he says, are due to this one central disease, talabul riyasa, seeking power, fame, wealth, worldly benefits, وَمَنْزِلَ فِي قُلُوبِ النَّاسِ, having a position in the hearts of people. And he explains this. He says, فَالْعَالِمْ مِنْهُمْ يَغْضَبُ إِنْ رُدَّ عَلَيْهِ خَطَأُ وَالْوَاعِظُ مُتَصَنِّعٌ بِوَعْظِهِ وَالْمُتَزَهِّدٌ مُنَافِقٌ أَوْ مُرَائٍ. He says, for instance, the scholars among them might become angry if their mistakes are corrected. Ulama sometimes make mistakes. If the alim gets angry, this is a sign of nafs, of ego. He says, the preacher, the wa'idh, the person who stands in this position, the wa'idh, they often put on a show of piety, and the would-be ascetics, the mutazahidun, are either hypocritical or they are pretentious. So you have this. Scholars often tend to be very choleric, meaning they're very strong-willed, and they have a tendency to be very stubborn, and they have egos. And very often, if they don't address their own souls, they will not like to be corrected by others. And this is the reality, and they have to work on themselves just like everyone else. As Imam Malik rahimahullah famously said, كُلٌّ يُؤْخَذُ مِنْ قَوْلِهِ أَوْ يُرَدْ إِلَّا صَاحِبَ هَذَا الْقَبْرِ. Everyone's statement is accepted or rejected except the one in this grave, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's ulama. Preachers or wa'adh, the people who give the khatirahs and the reminders and shout and remind people, very often they struggle with this hypocrisy of everything being a performance. It is very performative, and they're displaying in their speech and mannerisms a state that they don't actually have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is very dangerous. So pretension is their struggle. And the would-be ascetics, the ones who have cut themselves off from the dunya, they seem to be disinterested in the trappings of dunya, but in reality, he's saying that many of them want to be seen as zahid. Oh, mashallah, zahid, munqati'un. He doesn't care about dunya. He's an ascetic. They want that praise from people. So he says, فأول عقوباتهم إعراضهم عن الحق شغلا بالخلق ومن خفي عقوباتهم سلب حلاوة المناجاة ولذة التعبد. The first of their punishments is that they turn away from the truth. They turn away from the real Allah, al-Haq, due to their preoccupations with creation, the give and the take, the back and forth, the anger, the jealousy, the resentment, the rancor, or showing off, or seeking praise, or seeking power, or money, or fame, or wealth, or whatever it may be. This is shughlan bid-dunya, busy with the dunya. And he says, from the hidden forms of punishment they receive is stripping the sweetness of munajat, that intimate discourse you have with Allah Jalla wa Ala, and the delight of ta'abbud, of devotional worship. But this, lest you think he's being overly pessimistic in saying that all of the ulama are like this, or all of the wa'ad are like this, or all of the zuhad are like this. He's saying, no, not all. He says, إِلَّا رِجَالٌ مُؤْمِنُونَ وَنِسَاءٌ مُؤْمِنَاتٌ يَحْفَظُ اللَّهُ بِهِمُ الْأَرْضَ بَوَاطِنُهُمْ كَظَوَاهِرِهِمْ بَلْ أَجْلَى وَسَرَائِرُهُمْ كَعَلَانِيَتِهِمْ بَلْ أَحْلَى وَهِمَمُهُمْ عِنْدَ الثُّرَيَّا بَلْ أَعْلَى إِنْ عُرِفُوا تَنَكَّرُوا وَإِنْ رُؤِيَتْ لَهُمْ كَرَامَةٌ أَنْكَرُوا. Except for the believing men and the believing women by whom Allah preserves the earth, their internal reality is like their outward reality. They have congruence, mutabaqa, between the inward and the outward. They don't present something they don't actually have in reality. He says, rather, indeed, their internal reality is even brighter. And their inward reality with Allah, in their sincerity, is even more powerful than what they may manifest in their speech and actions. He says their private life is like their public life. There's no closets, Their private life is like their public life. Indeed, their private life is ahla, is even sweeter. Their aspirations are set to the Pleiades, this constellation, rather higher than that. When they are recognized, they seek obscurity. And if a miracle is witnessed from them, they deny it. Al-Hafidh Abu Nu'aym al-Asfahani, rahimahullah, this is not mentioned by Ibn al-Jawzi, but this reminds me of this incident mentioned by Al-Hafidh Abu Nu'aym al-Asfahani. He transmits from Imam Sufyan al-Thawri. Sufyan al-Thawri was a great alim, abid, rabbani, and he was very famous. And one time he was with another scholar, another alim, and they were going out to get water from this large well. And back then the wells are crowded with lots of people. There's tons of people all trying to get the water. And in the crowd, no one recognized them. And so they had to wait their turn and deal with the hustle and bustle of getting their spot and filling their water. And Sufyan al-Thawri looked at this scholar and said, this is how it should be. This is how it should be. In other words, if you're recognized as an alim, you don't go around looking for the alim discount. Some people do this, subhanAllah. I've experienced this too, subhanAllah. Astaghfirullah wa atubu ilayh. They see, this is the Imam Saab. We'll give him a discount. Now, that's from their ta'zeem, their reverence for the sacred knowledge that person may carry. So that's coming from a good place from them. But it's a danger too for the person who represents that position to assume that they deserve some kind of special discount because they're the sheikh, or they're the imam, they're this and that. So Sufyan al-Thawri is telling his student or the fellow scholar, this is how it should be. You should not go as a scholar and demand recognition, respect my authority, give me, the special spot in the line. And this is important for ulama to cultivate. You have the long iftar line. Okay, maybe if you're the imam leading Taraweeh, you need to go into the front of the line so you can eat a little bit early, right? But if you're the sheikh or the alim and you're in the iftar line, go to the back, go to the line, go where it ends. Don't assume you can just push ahead, respect my authority. This is coming from a place of nafs. So this is how the alim should cultivate himself. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us insight into the nature of ourselves and make our inward better than our outward. Ahla wa ajla. Ameen. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.